Hi, this is Jay with Jay Prior Consulting. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, we are talking about building culture. We're talking about gender nonconforming and transgender people in the workforce, and we're talking about the idea that in 2025, 75% of your workforce are going to be millennials, and how do you get on board with making sure that you understand what they're seeing and experiencing in your workplace. So I want to go a little deeper on that. In the next week or so, if you have an opportunity, I want to give you an exercise, maybe an experiment for you to try on. So one of the things that's been stark for me is having small children. I have 8-year-olds, and showing them movies from the past that I have loved and thought, there's nothing bad in this movie, and then showing it to my 8-year-old and being horrified by some of the sexist misogyny and, just horrible stuff. I recently had a friend of mine recommend that I show my kids The Land of the Lost. Now, I grew up with The Land of the Lost, and I thought how fun it would be to show my kids what a slee stack looks like. And, this person that recommended it has kids, and we're like, oh yeah, it's a good movie. The person that recommended it is a white cisgendered man, by the way. And I'm going to go back to him, by the way, and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, why I would show that to my children? Never. I don't need to do that. So Land of the Lost starts out okay, and then the next thing you know, there's huge sexism, tons of inappropriate touching women it's just inappropriate. Inappropriate language, all kinds of stuff. But my point is, this guy that told me about that, he didn't see any of that, right? It's this idea of the water that we're swimming in, you can't see, and the younger generation, they can see it. So I want to give you this idea, like pick a movie, pick anything like that, pick The Land of the Lost with Will Ferrell, doesn't matter. Pick any movie that is older, pick one from 10 years ago and show it to a teenager with you. Watch it with a teenager and see, first of all, if you're not conscious to some of the things that are going on in the movie, they will be. But even you will probably, most of us at this point are a little more woke than we were, right, 10 years ago. But even 3 years ago, there's so much, right? But the point in doing this exercise is to have you start to flex your muscle around accepting their version, the millennials, the Gen Z's version of what they see, right? Because we have to give up that our lens on reality is theirs. They're in your workforce, and part of our job is to create a culture and a workforce that is inclusive and that hears their perspective. And the good news is we have these millennials, we've raised them to speak up for themselves. So that's good news, and they're not afraid to tell you. And so in your workforce and building your culture, you have to know this, right? You have to have your eye on how they see the world, right? Everybody's world, there's a Cuban proverb that says every head is a world. And right now, the world you need to be concerned about as a business owner is the world of the view of the millennial versus the Gen Xer and the boomers. And it is a very, very different view. Bigger skew than we've probably ever seen. It's just huge. And so that's something to have your eye on, and I want to give you that assignment that if you haven't done that already, now some of you're already in this conversation, you know this, but if you haven't done this already, I really want to recommend that you go find a movie that you think is completely innocuous, there's nothing bad about it, and watch it with a teenager. And let them tell you what they think about it, and embrace their perspective, see what they see. And start flexing your muscle around that, because your workforce in 2025 will be 75% millennial. And you've got to build a sustainable culture moving forward. You've got to be willing to see their perspective. So I hope that makes sense to you. Thank you always for joining me. If you have questions, please hit us up right here at LinkedIn or come to our website, www.jpriorconsulting.com. Thanks again.